I want to ask you about the big story from my perspective. I know your first memory is about the big ass ladder. Mine is about Randy Savage. We haven't seen Randy Savage on a pay per view in forever at this point. I mean, he left WCW months before it was over. So I think we're going to be around 4 years since we've really seen him. And from what I understand, this is a last minute deal that's put together. I guess what you guys were working on with Sting, those negotiations had fallen through, and Randy Savage is going to come in. And I remember at the time feeling like Randy was old. And now I look back and I think he was only 52. And there's a lot of great wrestlers in wrestling today who are older than 52. I won't name any names, but I'm really good friends with one of them. And I mean, seriously, he takes his shirt off and he looks better than he was in his 20s. Now, Randy here is going to be covered head to toe. I mean, he's going to come in dressed like a damn ninja. I mean, there he is right there, just all black. I mean, you can kind of see that's Randy, but not really. But this is kind of a weird deal because he's going to come in as a post-match angle, if you will, for the main event. And it's quite a visual. You know, Jeff Jarrett, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and now Randy Savage. It feels like he's here. And then we find out that he quits the company just 2 days later. He's going to say that this is an unsafe working environment and he's out of here. And I guess his feelings were hurt. And I'm not saying that in an ugly way, that when he showed up, Hulk Hogan was there. Or at least that's what's written here. There's a claim that Hulk Hogan was negotiating with Jerry Jarrett. Your dad was trying to reel the big fish in. I know you've tried before, but now we're trying again. This time your dad gets him to come to the building. And allegedly they're negotiating that same day. Jerry, Bob Carter, and the real life Terry Bollea. Do you remember Hulk Hogan being at this show?
I wish that okay, so and you'd get 15 different answers even if everybody got at the table, because Dutch and Vince and myself and Borash and Dixie and Bob Carter and all that. But we knew, look, Randy, and we've gone into great detail on this show about my father's relationship with Randy Savage. And look, I worked with Randy in the WWF and WCW, but you know, him and my old man's relationship goes really deep. And I think the best way, we've talked about this, two guys that were really at war with each other with super tensions that came together, and he had that run in Memphis. And then, you know, he gets the call and Vince McMahon wants you to come work for him. And he went to my old man and said, "Hey, I'm going to Vince. I don't know how you feel about it. What do you want me to do? I'll stay here literally and work. If it's 2 weeks, if it's a month, if it's 6 weeks, I'm going to work till you don't want me anymore," kind of in a reasonable scenario, because he had so much respect for my father. And so they did the loser leave town, and then he went off. But him and my dad always had that tight relationship. Us going all in and doing the monthly pay-per-views and getting Hall and Nash on board and me and Hardy in the main event, we wanted to shake up the bushes and get as much buzz, if you will. And we wanted to leave a cliffhanger because we're coming back the following month with the next monthly pay-per-view. And how do you kind of throw a hook into something that, you know, that makes sense and has a buzz and everything that went with this? So Randy was that, what was that guy? Well, you know, you don't really understand how good or bad a relationship is until, that didn't go quite as rosy, because Hogan offered, the best of my recollection is, "Hey, Jerry, we're talking, and I don't know if it's going to be the December or into January, into February and March." And, you know, and my old man and others knew, okay, he can be playing us to get a better deal for Vince. But
Again,
yes, but who cares? If he wants to show up, and that's okay. Not really knowing where Randy and Hulk's relationship, that I think only those two guys know. Matter of fact, I'm positive that I don't think anybody really knows, because we'll call them the mega powers, the amount of money they drew, their business relationship. Obviously, when you work that tight with somebody through the years and then form the personal relationship, and then where both of their lives headed. But we're talking end of '04. Their relationship was not very good or horrible. Again, we didn't really know the depths of it, but the result of Hogan saying, I'm in Tampa, you guys are in Orlando, I'll drive over. And I don't know if Hogan knows best where all that was at the time, but look, Hogan was shaking and moving and just wanting to keep a buzz, if you will, and we didn't mind that. We just didn't foresee Randy going, F this, I'm out.
Hogan Knows Best was about 9 hours or 9 months away from debuting. So they were probably at least in discussions
Okay.
about doing the show. Maybe they had dates. It does make sense that he might have thought, hey, this would be a nice way to get some crossover and things like that. I know you've tried before when your dad's taking a stab at it and he gives you a call and says, hey, I got Terry to come to the show. Were you shocked?
See, Conrad, I wish I could tell you. My gut tells me, my memory tells me that we didn't realize he was just going to drive over. That was like a last minute deal. Hey, I'll just drive over. Oh, okay. It was, and it's hard for our listeners to kind of go back in time because just of where the industry was. Vince bought the competition. WCW went away. There was really nothing on the horizon for a few years from March of '01, and now we are here we are November of '04, and having a Hall and Nash big, having a Jeff Hardy, a monthly pay-per-view. We weren't anything to write home about, but we were a international company that was doing their first pay-per-view. So rightfully there was a buzz, if you will, probably more industry inside as opposed to mainstream, but there was a buzz. And so, Bob Carter, I don't know exactly what went down, but it was a last minute deal. There was no big plans for Hulk to come over and for us to have this big round table discussion. We came to produce the show that weekend.
Here's what's written. Hogan being there created a backstage issue with Savage there. Well, let me back it up. Hogan claiming to be fresh off of a meeting the day before with Vince McMahon.
There we go. There we go.
Came to the pay-per-view and negotiated at length with Jerry Jarrett and talked with many of the wrestlers as well as the TNA owner, Bob Carter. Hogan expressed an interest in coming in, but wanted to have the final say-so in creative, basically taking Jeff Jarrett's power position, although perhaps not in public name. Let's time out right there. Do you remember creative control being a sticking point for the Hulkster?
I mean, from day one, at this stage of, we'll call it post NWO, Hogan's not going to, look, the whole lawsuit of Bash at the Beach was over creative control. So whatever deal was going to be discussed before pen to paper was going to go down, we were going to agree on, here's, it wasn't like he was coming in going to be a member of the roster and work 26 TVs. It was, any discussion was build to a pay-per-view. Let's see how the pay-per-view does, and we'll go from there. He wasn't going to give us an option, although we may or may not want one. But it was going to be very cut and dried. It was almost without saying, Hulk, let's figure out creatively on the front end as opposed to the back end what you want to do, and if we can come to terms, we'll do it.
Let me ask you about Bob Carter here for a minute. He is obviously not as well versed in wrestling as you or Dutch or Jerry or any of those folks. But everybody knows the name Hulk Hogan.
Yep.
How excited at the opportunity to have Hulk Hogan was Bob Carter?
On a scale of 1 to 10,
that'd be great.
Probably an 8 or a 9. A guy that Bob, again, there were so many things written that I used to smile and chuckle out and then like, man, that ain't cool. But, Bob, the chairman of Panda Energy International. Bob, a wildcatter that came up the hard way. Bob was not a wealthy man by any standards. to my understanding, in his 40s. I think he started making money in his 50s, but now here we are. He had made a lot of money in the energy business. And so he ran Panda and all of his other ventures, Black ink versus red ink. I mean, what are we going to do here? So at this point, we're 2.5 years into the investment, and we had brought him options, but it goes without saying, just what you said. Hey, Hulk Hogan is the guy that was on front of Sports Illustrated. Hulk Hogan was the guy that was on the Tonight Show. And Hulk Hogan was, everybody knew Hulk, especially by 2004. And that, man, if I can get him part of this brand, it may be the accelerator that investment needs that get multiples much quicker than you expected.
I just find it interesting and fascinating, what that dynamic must have looked like. But here's what's written in the newsletters of the time. Hogan being there created a backstage issue with Savage there. Savage was furious Hogan was there, feeling the company had double crossed him. Savage hates Hogan to the point he spent a year running all over the country knocking Hogan, wrote a song calling Hogan a chicken, and even did a grandstand challenge for a $50,000 shoot fight for a children's charity in Tampa. Hogan, who, like McMahon, understands there's a thin line between hate and love, particularly when you can make money with someone you hate, tried to be nice even after everything Savage had said publicly about him. Both brought in street fighters with them, as Savage came to the building with Brian Adams and Hogan came with Brian Knobs. From several sources, Hogan went to him and spoke first, saying, "I want to smooth things out," and words along the lines of, "I love you, brother," or "we can make money together," according to another. Savage responded with a flippant remark and refused to shake Hogan's hand. There are disputes about this next line, but some have said Hogan said if Savage felt that way, they could step outside and settle it. And Savage immediately backed down. Others said that Hogan didn't say that, but he was instead trying in every way to smooth things over, and Savage was just being a total asshole about it, and he blew Hogan off and walked away. But then 2 days later, Savage canceled appearing on the TV show, claiming it was because Hogan was threatening him, which is a joke, and that TNA provided him with an unsafe working environment. It's clear Savage never had any intention of wrestling and used Hogan as his excuse. When Savage came, he was wearing a huge jacket to hide his physique and sweating like crazy. He never even took the jacket off. Savage, when he's juiced up and in shape, always wears sleeveless t-shirts in public like Hogan. So everyone assumed he was small and not in shape, as he'd lost a lot of weight in the last year or two, after he'd gotten up to about 260 pounds of muscle after leaving wrestling. The feeling is that Savage was taking the believed to be $25,000 one-night payoff and would string them along before coming up with an excuse when it comes time to pay off the angle in the ring. The same game he pulled on Andrew McManus 2 years ago. Still, TNA made the crucial mistake of putting him on the air without a signed contract, relying on his verbal commitment to wrestle on the next pay-per-view. And after what happened with Hogan, you'd think they would have learned. So we'll stop right there. What do you remember hearing about this Hogan Savage backstage confrontation, if you will?
All post pay-per-view. Got to remember, I'm dealing with, again, the very first pay-per-view, 3-hour pay-per-view. So Keith Mitchell and his team in the truck, and then obviously, whatever packages are coming down from Nashville to be integrated into the pay-per-view, and then the matches that are outside of mine that I would, are probably going to have to make a few calls and discuss. It just goes with the territory. You got to deal with a little bit of everything. Conrad, I had no idea of the depths and any of this confrontation or supposed confrontation. It was like, "Hey, Dad, I didn't even tell him to handle it. He was already handling it. It didn't come across my desk. Not that I had a desk down there, but it didn't come across mine at all. I'm dealing with, we've already gone through kind of the challenges of Jeff Hardy and prior to getting him to the pay-per-view, Conrad, I had no idea. I learned about it after the show and the days to come, and it was a lot of disappointment. And you probably know exactly where my mind went was, okay, what's Bob Carter think about this mess? Or is he
Yep.
aware of it? Or how is he digesting that? Or what really happened? What's his takeaway? All that kind of stuff. Because again, a huge night, and to have two guys that aren't really an integral part of the show. One's not even a part of the show. As big of legends as they are, and their status and all that, it wasn't good for business for any of us to be distracted, and I mean any of us to be distracted going into this night.
Instagram a wrestling historian is with us here live tonight at myworldpod.com. And he agrees, or he's sharing with us the Pro Wrestling Insider report from Mike Johnson at the time. So it backs up one of these theories. Quote, Hogan offered to step outside so they could settle their differences after Savage had been talking trash about him. The Macho Man ignored his challenge and walked off. Man, I hate the way that reads because I just love the Macho Man, and I know you do too. And we can't pretend to know what was really going on in that relationship. But I mean, the guy we know who was fighting police dogs at the Waffle House in Middle Tennessee, it's hard for me to imagine he didn't want to step outside with Hulk Hogan here.
Now, I mean, if you ask me, my perspective, and look, it's an eyewitness report that talked to an eyewitness report. I mean, by the time it got to print, my gut, but my thought is Randy came as a favor to Jeff, to Jerry, I'll say, and Jeff Jarrett, but he came as a favor to the Jarretts, and let me step out at the end of this pay-per-view, and let's see if, we quasi agreed, hey, we can do this, and we can build to this 6-man. So whatever the agreement was, that's what we're going to do, and be all professional about it. And then, Hogan showing up unannounced, or I'll say unannounced to Randy, he immediately is going to be thinking, like any wrestler, but you have to almost amp this up. All right, did Jerry know he was coming? Did Jerry just double cross me? All right, so now Bob Carter, if I'm going to negotiate or try to be a part of this brand, did Bob Carter, is he behind? It just threw a monkey wrench in everything. And look, at the end of the day, you have to look at Hogan knew what he was doing, but he also could have said, man, it's an opportunity for maybe, and I don't want to say make amends, but maybe I can talk to Randy in this kind of wrestling setting and say, hey, let's go make money with this. And maybe TNA is the place to make money, because I don't, in Hulk's mind, I don't see me making money with Jarrett or Hardy, or, maybe Hall and Nash can be. I don't know. I don't know what the thought was. It was just bad timing. It was what it was.
Does that number sound right, that you guys would have paid Randy $25,000 for that appearance on the pay-per-view?
Hell no.
It's hard for me to imagine that would have been the number.
Yeah, it anything that killed us.
I know for sure that I shouldn't say I know for sure. All the newsletters were saying that it was Jerry who was in touch with Hogan. Were you the contact on Savage, or did somebody else handle that for you guys?
To me, and it depended on what iteration, we were both contacts, but depending upon the situation. In this set of circumstances, yes. When did the rap album come out?
Right before.
Yeah. So post that rap album, I would have thought I would have been the lead on Randy. And creatively speaking, we're going to set up a 6-man. My gut tells me I was the lead on Randy, and my dad was the lead on Hulk.
And the album came out the year before, so that whole "Be a Man" Hulk song was only a year old at this point.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Gosh almighty.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about, what's written here. You put him on TV and you didn't have a signed contract. And of course, the newsletters are wagging their finger at you saying, you should have known better. You should have learned with Hogan when he did it to you. Do you remember this feeling like a fool me once, fool me twice, or because the investment wasn't significant, it wasn't that big a deal?
Wasn't that big a deal. And look, we never, creatively, it's not like we overcommitted on anything. It was, again, just such a different era in professional wrestling to me, that we were wanting to, again, pre-YouTube, pre-X, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Just create some buzz, knowing we got 30 days, but most importantly, 4 TVs to tell whatever story we needed to tell, with or without Randy. So having him on the pay-per-view, what was the real downside? It's not like he was beating up a bunch of heels. He just walked out at the end.